And we are live. This is going to be something different for me, something different that I've done before. Let's see if I can get this right. So yeah, I'm gonna do something different today. Because the name of the channel is Escape the Echo Chamber, right? But if I'm just saying how I feel, and the only people showing up are people that agree with how I already think, then we haven't actually escaped the echo chamber. We've just created a different echo chamber. So what I want to do, and this is going to be hard because I've been thinking about this for a couple of days now, several days now, about how to accomplish this. And I said the best thing to do is just get in there and try. So what I'm going to do is, in a few minutes, I'm going to start the clock. A few minutes, I'm going to start the clock for an hour. For an hour, I am going to be somebody who advocates and supports gun control. For the hour that I start this timer, that's who I am. That's what I'm thinking. That's all my arguments. All of my everything I'm saying is coming from the perspective of a person who supports gun control. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to do that, but if you're somebody that opposes gun control, feel free to comment what you think I'm wrong, and I'll try my best to argue competently from the position of somebody who supports gun control. If you're somebody who supports gun control and you think that some of my arguments are flimsy or not doing you justice, feel free to let me know, because I'm not trying to create a straw man of the pro gun control position. I want to put forth the most compelling, the most impassioned, the most substantive arguments of a side that I don't necessarily agree with, because that's what escaping the echo chamber is about. It's about not just me being in my own head with my own thoughts. Like, I have to be able to put myself into the mindset, into the thoughts, into the feelings, the motivations of other people who may not just don't think like me, but may have drastically different opinions, drastically different solutions that they're looking for than I do. So I want to do the other side justice. And like I said, if you are somebody who supports gun control and you think I'm not doing it justice, please let me know. So I'm about to start the clock. And once I start the clock, it's going to be for an hour. The next hour, I'm going to be pushing, um, advocating for gun control. And like I said, if you disagree with gun control, feel free to to let to push back. But I'm going to try to do my best to argue from a position of what if what if me what if escaping the echo chamber supported gun control. So I'm going to start the clock in a minute. But if escaping the echo chamber, I know some people who come late may not may be surprised to hear some of the things I'm saying. Um, but like I said, hey, like I said, I think this is a something that needs to be done, not just for this issue, all across the board. There's a bunch of issues that we need to be able to start looking at the other sides, what they believe and why they believe it. Really try to understand. Really try to put ourselves mentally, emotionally where they're coming from. And I think, like in the like I said, in the past couple of days, I've been thinking about this um, a lot, and so I'm like, what if I think I see some of the reasons and some of the emotional motivation, but like I said, if I'm not doing that side justice, feel free to let me know where I'm falling short. Feel free to let me know if I'm falling short, if I'm not putting forward a competent argument and a competent depiction of somebody who supports gun control. So let me start the timer. For the next hour, I am going to be a supporter of gun control. 59 minutes and I've started this clock. Oh, that was horrible. Okay. But the timer has started, and so now I'm going to be arguing on behalf of the gun control side because it's something. Hey, Kenny, welcome to the stream. Welcome to the stream. Jay, the informate, welcome. Welcome to the stream. Tac Lad, welcome. I hear you. I hear you. I hear you, Tac Lad. But people are dying. People are being slaughtered. And this is happening over and over again. Like, we can't ignore it. Like, we can't pretend it's not happening. We can't pretend that, boom, Buffalo didn't happen. Then, boom, Uvalde happened. So now Buffalo, 10 innocent people died, were murdered, slaughtered. He shot 13 people. And remember, he bought his gun legally. He bought an AR-15. He took it into that store and he slaughtered those people. And then, so I do believe in some reasonable gun control laws. Like if you're on SSI for a mental disability, then you shouldn't have a gun or own one. Well, you see, Kenny, there are some people who are proposing, and a little bit later on, I'm going to go into a list because in preparing for this, hey, Kenny, what's the point of an assault rifle? Right. Okay. I get that. Like, what's the point? Why do you need a weapon of war? If we have regular civilians, if we have regular civilians in this country running around with weapons of war, what does that say about where we are as a society? What does that say about what we are expecting from each other and basically what we're preparing for? Like, what does it mean as to where this country is if regular citizens are running around with weapons of war? These super dangerous weapons that should be only on a battlefield. Why are regular civilian, non-law enforcement, non-military individuals possessing these guns? If the purpose of these guns is to kill a bunch of people, then that right there tells us we shouldn't be allowing these guns in the hands of anybody. Like, these guns should be banned. There was an assault weapons ban from 1994 to 2004. Why can't we do that again? You say, but if someone wants a gun for protection, then they should. Okay, but as an advocate for gun control, I think, like, why, if we have police departments, if we really want to cut down on gun violence, shouldn't we have, like, shouldn't the goal be to have no guns in civilians' hands? Like, why wouldn't that be a good thing? Why wouldn't it be a good thing to have, like, just because, so like in New York City, You can't buy a like it's so strict. Like even to get a handgun, you have to get a permit and all this other stuff. And only if you have the certain need will you be able to get a handgun in New York City. But there's a bunch of gun violence in New York City, but you have people like, so there's a Reuters article that said most guns used in New York City crimes are from out of state. So now, if we're saying that owning guns like that by not allowing people to buy guns is a bad thing. If you take a look at the people that are using illegal guns, the legal guns that exist in New York City are coming from states where they're allowed to buy guns. So the the gun laws, the strict gun laws within New York City are stopping people from getting access to guns, but according to like these articles, they're getting these guns from states that have permissive gun laws. So what if we had stricter gun laws all across, and then we could drastically lessen the amount of guns that were in the hands of even criminals? Uh, but if so, what's the gun? Okay, 58. It's not going to be easy, Kenny. It's not going to be easy. Um, but yeah, I want to do it justice, though, Kenny. I really want to do it justice. I really so because like so I don't want to just have the arguments. I also want to get into the mindset of why a person believes this, right? Because like if I'm as a regular person, I look, I'm seeing the gun violence in New York City. I'm seeing people getting, like just the guy on the train. Guy on the train is just sitting there, sitting in the subway car. Somebody just comes up who's pacing back and forth in the car, shoots him. Shoots, no reason whatsoever. I think just last night, a teenage girl was killed, was shot. I'm not sure if she was killed, but she was shot in her apartment, in her no, no home. Stray bullet. Philly over the weekend. You got these dudes having a shootout, and they're hitting a whole bunch of random people. Like, don't we have to at least try to get these guns off the street? Don't we have to at least try to limit the people's access to these guns? Don't we have to? Because if we don't try, aren't we just saying that we don't actually care about the people that are dying? Isn't that what we're saying? If you're, like I said, if you disagree with me, feel free to say something and feel free to let me know. And if you think I'm not putting forth a good argument on behalf of the gun control side, let me know. But here's like, what did I say? So this article I saw in Reuters talked about most guns used in New York crimes are from out of state. So they did a study, and this was several years ago, but they were saying that the state's attorney general at the time, it was Schneiderman, Eric Schneiderman, had used federal data that's not available to the public to determine where about 46,514 firearms tied to crimes from 2010 to 2015 had been purchased. So, according to this report, 86% of handguns recovered by law enforcement were from out of state. 86% are out of state. So that means that the strict gun laws in New York City were stopping people from being able to get guns in New York City. They had to get these guns from other states that didn't have these strict gun laws. So if we had these strict gun laws all across the state, all across the country, wouldn't that cut down on people's access to guns? Wouldn't that cut down on gun violence? And to go back to the assault rifles, let's talk about the assault rifles. Why do we need them? If you're gonna go hunting, why don't you have a regular rifle or a lower gauge shotgun? And I say lower gauge shotguns because I know depending on what you're shooting, you know, or should I say higher gauge shotgun? Because I know that the higher gauge shotguns the lower gauge shotguns would do too much damage. Uh, so just Kenny, you said New York City, you can't buy mace. Okay, well here's the deal. What if we allow people to have non-lethal alternatives to protect themselves, so that people can still protect themselves, but we get guns out the picture? What if we do that? Is that okay? Does that like, dude? I was almost shot at this morning in my neighborhood. See, this is what I'm saying. It's really crazy out there because you've got these people that are out there shooting and they don't know how to shoot. So they're shooting, they're hitting everything but the person they're aiming at. So innocent bystanders are getting just dropping like flies. And then, these guys run away. And then they see each other again later on, start shooting again. Once again, they just start shooting indiscriminately, no discipline, no concern about who they're hitting, and they're getting these guns. Like this report says, they're getting these guns from states that have lax gun laws. Yeah, they bought from down south. That's not new. My nephew hunts. He doesn't use an AK. Okay, why do we need AKs or AKs, AR-15s, AK-40s? Why do we need those guns? Why do civilians need those guns? What if what if the laws were much stricter? What if people had to go through no, what if we started with an assault weapons ban again, right? Go back to the 94 assault weapons ban. What if we did that? Wouldn't that stop AR-15s from being readily available and people being able to use these guns to commit these mass shootings, these mass murders? Wouldn't that stop people from that? Wouldn't that, I mean, these 19 babies in Buffalo, no, it's 19 babies in Uvalde, then these poor innocent people that were just trying to shop, older people, that younger father that was just trying to get a birthday cake for his son, wouldn't they still be here if we stopped people from being able to buy AR-15s, the non-lethal alternatives? So okay, so um, but here's what I say about not just your fist, but you have mace. What about stun guns, stuff like that that can people can carry to protect themselves and not have to worry about taking somebody else's life? Because like, don't we want to to respect life? Aren't we being too eager, too dismissive? Aren't we devaluing people's lives by being so ready to to use lethal force against other human beings? Audi. Because guns will always be there, drugs are illegal, and drugs are still in the streets. But we here's the thing. This one's going to be a tough one for me. Are drugs, well, guns will always be there, drugs are illegal, and drugs are still in the streets, but we've banned them, right? But we have these strict drug laws in existence. So then how can we say that it's okay to have these drug laws, but it's not okay to have gun laws and at least attempt to restrict people from these guns from being everywhere? We need AKs, so at least we have some fighting chance against the tyrannical government. So one of the arguments is, but I mean, if number one, do we really think that the do we really think that regular civilians? Okay, I got 45 minutes left. Like I said, this is not going to be easy, and I have to be, and I have to put forth the strongest arguments I can. Okay, so tyrannical government. Do we really believe that the government is going to start just become so tyrannical that it's necessary for us to pick up guns against it? Do we really think that that is something we need to worry about? Like, what about respecting the law, respecting the rule of law, just maintaining law and order? Because that right there sounds like some conspiracy theory type thinking, that the government's going to turn into something else, and we're going to be we're going to have to pick up guns and go to war against the government. Like, that's not something. I don't think that's something that's realistic, and I don't think there's something any of us really want to see. So why would we be actively trying to prepare for something like that? Stun guns and tasers are banned in New York City. Okay, so here's the thing. What if we make stun guns and tasers available to private citizens, and so that private citizens have some means to protect ourselves, and then leave the guns, especially heavy duty weapons, especially assault rifles, into the hands of law enforcement and the military? I'm surprised. The government has always been tyrannical to black people. The country was founded on tyranny. Things have gotten much. Yes, this country has a history of doing bad things to black people. But I think we can agree that there are significant mechanisms available for black people to take advantage of right now. When the government is running afoul of rights. So now we have the ability to go to courts, to sue, to to even appeal to government officials. We've got civilian complaint boards. We've got government officials. We got like attorney generals we can turn to if the government is doing something wrong. And if a state or local governments are acting up, we can go to the federal government, and the federal government has intervened. I mean, we've seen the federal government intervene in many of these cases when our rights are being violated by local officials. We've seen the ability of black people to go to courts and get some kind of redress for our issues. So it's not like we really need to be focused on having assault weapons. And even so, assault weapons, an AR-15 versus an F-16, like there's not going to be, or an Apache helicopter, that's not going to be much of a fight. You know what I'm saying? It's happened all throughout history, even happened here in our own country, what we did to Native Americans. But don't you think we've moved past that? Don't you think we've moved to a place where the country we have it's not a perfect union, but it's a much better union. It's a much more responsive, it's a much more equitable, it's a much more, there's so many more options provided for us to get justice and not have to worry about resorting to violence in order to protect ourselves. And I'm not saying the system is perfect, but I'm saying the system does have checks and balances that we can take advantage of. And so I mean, so one of the things I was I had recently looked at, I looked at something from David Pakman, and he had did it. I think your strongest argument would be to look at how countries with heavy gun culture, control deal respectively with safety. Thank you, Ken. Okay, yes, let's take a look at it. I'm trying. The other countries. So yes, there's a bunch of other countries that have much stricter laws on gun control, and they're not dealing with the issues that the United States of America is dealing. Like that's I mean, that should right there be a blueprint for us. If there's other countries that have strict gun control and they're not dealing with these mass shootings on a regular basis, I'm not saying they never have them, but if we're having them weekly or bi-weekly, like, we have to realize there's a problem. There's something wrong if we're having bi-weekly mass shootings or more. If you have a mass shooting in Buffalo, mass shooting in Uvalde, then we've got Tulsa, then we've got Philly, we've got Milwaukee, like we've got just back to back to back. We've got kids in a little girl in Queens getting shot in her in her house, straight bullets flying in. Like, there has to be something we can do. And if we can look at other countries that have stricter gun laws, can we say, hey, okay, stricter gun laws can actually work. Stricter gun laws can actually make put us in a position where there's less gun violence, less mass shootings, less of these events from these deranged, evil people who just want to cause mass bloodshed. Like, can't we save some lives if we look at what other countries have done? Okay, so how do you stop a Buffalo shooter-esque individual armed with assault weaponry from killing as many as he did within a short time span? Criminals don't obey the law, you know. But his gun was legally purchased. He had an AR-15 that he legally purchased from um, because he was upstate New York, so he was able to legally purchase that gun, and then he used it to murder a bunch of people. So if that gun had been illegal, then it would have stopped him from, he wouldn't have had the gun available to be able to do the shooting. Now, what if he used a different gun and he's not as able to kill as many people as he was with the AR-15? Those countries don't have nearly as militarized of a police force as the USA, though. Well, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think if the militarization of the police force is to meet the militarization and the level of arms that the citizenry has here in the States. So if we can get the guns out of the hands of civilians, then we can get to a point where we can start to roll back some of the militarization of police. And even if the police are militarized, if we're focused on very effective training and screening of law enforcement, we can make sure that we only have the best and stable individuals in law enforcement, so that even if they do have access to militarized weaponry, we can feel safe knowing that they will use it to protect the public rather than ever using it improperly against the public. Um, the only way to guarantee liberty is when government is scared of its citizens, where we hold power. I don't think that, I don't think, no, I think if the government is scared of us, then we have to worry that the government is going to do bad things. Like, I think if the government, I think we get the government, basically, we can get the government we demand through other means, through peaceful means. I mean, if we vote the right people in office, if we if we're civically responsible, if we're paying attention to what's going on, we can ensure that the people in power respect life and respect the citizenry, so that we don't have to worry about being endangered by them. But I do want to get to, so I've got 34 minutes left before these minutes expire. I want to get to something I've read. I went to David Pakman because I said, hey, if I'm going to argue from a position of supporting gun control, let me get one of the smartest people out there and see some of his ideas. So I got from him 10 ideas of things that could be done in relation to gun control. So, because there's a lot of people that will say, well, what are we supposed to do? And he had like 10 different suggestions. And I think he came up with this after, I think it was after Uvalde. I think so. But let me give you the 10 things that he suggested. I think comparing the US to other countries isn't just. Statistically, there are so many other variables to count for: culture, demographic, population size. But even percentage wise, are we looking at the same amount of gun violence in other countries that we do here? Like, isn't just the gun violence here disproportionate from a percentage wise? So to go to some of the things that he said, one of the things he said, one of the first things he said he would suggest in terms of gun control was ending the gun show loophole. So that means that instead of being able to buy guns at gun shows without background checks, if you buy a gun at a gun show, you still have to go through the background check and everything. There's no way around it. And even though I look at Uvalde, Buffalo, neither of those individuals got their guns from gun shows. Potentially, this one thing could stop certain people with bad intentions from getting their hands on a gun. So if a person knew they couldn't pass a background check, they might go to a gun show in order to get a gun. And then that way they'll be like, hey, okay, I can still get my gun, still do some bad stuff with it without having to worry about getting found out before I can get it. So I think like yeah, because the European countries have less gun violence, right? I know Australia is something that's frequently used, and I haven't looked at the numbers in terms of population comparison, but we do know that there's no other country that has okay. Well, okay, so it's often said that there's no other country that has as much gun violence, and that may not be entirely accurate, but from a standpoint of, I guess you would say, developed country, because I do know there's countries where there's just constant violence and constant bloodshed, but like there's usually something going on there, like a civil war. So ending the gun show loophole is one of the things. The second thing he wants to do is universal background checks. So that would apply to gun shows as well and to private sales. So in terms of if you're buying, if your next door neighbor is selling his gun, you'd still have to go through a background check and say, hey, yeah, I got to fill out the paperwork. Still got to get cleared by the feds to determine that I am eligible to own that firearm. Does that sound so? Just off the top, does that sound bad to individuals that actually are against gun control? Ending the gun show loophole, universal background checks. If it sounds good, let's move on to number three, a mandatory waiting period. So already for firearms, there's a 48-hour wait. Sorry, handguns. Handguns, there's a 48-hour waiting period. What if we had a 48-hour waiting period for all guns? What if we had a slightly longer waiting period for all guns? What if it was like a 5-day waiting period? Doesn't that give people time to make sure the background check is done thoroughly, and it also gives the possibility for if there's any red flags, any concerns about a specific individual, doesn't that give them time to for the appropriate authorities, appropriate individuals to find out and go, whoa, 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 not that guy. That guy can't get a gun. Let me see. Somebody commented. I'm gonna be back in 35 minutes then. Like I said, this isn't easy for me, but putting myself in somebody else's shoes, yeah, it's not necessarily supposed to be easy, but I do think it's something that could be very beneficial. Um, Rocket Man, Rocky Matrix, welcome to the stream. Then the shooting will still happen. Well, you see, here's the thing, but like if we have the like a comprehensive background check being taken place during those 5 days, doesn't that then pretend doesn't that then pre- present the opportunity for somebody to be like, oh, wait, that person's not supposed to have a gun. So that's why I say, like, so let me tell you, David Pakman gave 10 things. And so I'm going to go through the rest of them because that's just the first three. I'm going to go through the rest of them and then we can finish and look at them. So, no high capacity weapons under 25. So, if anybody who's under the age of 25, he says, hey, nobody should be able to own, these weapons with these, definitely no extended magazines, but just, I guess, single shot, maybe revolvers, maybe. Uh, Mandatory gun insurance. And he says, like, so mandatory gun insurance, and also if you're under 25, higher premiums. required community support letters for anyone under age 25 who wants a gun. So anyone under 25, they have to have support from the community, people saying, oh yes, this gentleman, this young man, great, kind young man, not a danger, not a knucklehead, not looking to harm people, well-adjusted person. He has references to go to buy the gun. 7, ban some weapons. So that would, your weapons of war, your assault rifles. These are weapons that, like, people could still have handguns, could still have other rifles, could still have shotguns, but they just don't need the AR-15s and stuff like that. The stuff that we've seen being used in these tragedies, in these massacres. Periodic mental health evaluation. So he's saying, hey, and the argument he says is, hey, you've got these Republicans talking about mental health is such an issue. Well, why isn't mental health being an issue? Why aren't people, before buying the gun, subjected to a mental health evaluation? Why aren't they subjected to a mental health evaluation, and then periodically, after owning the gun, having to go through mental health evaluations to make sure that they're not destabilized? Because if a person is having mental health problems, have a mental health crisis, and they have a bunch of guns, imagine a person has, an arsenal of 20 guns, and then something happens, they start having a mental health breakdown, they go through an evaluation, and people realize, oh boy, we need to step in and take this person's guns. Like, couldn't that save lives? An extensive licensing process. So, like, so even longer than just the 5-day waiting period of having to go through training and basically prove competency for the ability to own and properly operate a firearm. And then also buyback program to help get a lot of the guns. So I guess, like, if we're getting rid of AR-15s, so that people don't have to just lose their weapons, they can be compensated for their weapons. And so these are the 10 things that David Pakman had suggested as being possible gun control laws that could be enacted. And, like, even if all 10 of these things are enacted, people still get to own handguns, people still get to own rifles, people still get to own shotguns. So there are a bunch of people that still get to have their guns. Now, there are some people who don't get to have guns, and those will be the people that can't pass the mental health evaluation. They don't have their guns, right? They don't get to keep guns. The people that can't pass the licensing process, they can't get the guns. They haven't displayed the competency, the knowledge, the safety, the all of the things that they need to do to justify being able to own a gun. Just like if they can't drive, they can't get the driver's license. Boom, they don't have the requisite knowledge of safety, safe handling of the firearm. They can't get the license. And then and people under 25 who don't have a stable community support system, they can't get the guns. So that, but the other people, other bunch of other people still get to have guns, get to keep guns. So isn't that a good thing? Haven't we managed to succeed in still letting a bunch of people have guns and keeping guns out of the hands of some very dangerous people? Haven't we achieved that? Haven't we gotten a lot closer? And so we may not save everybody's life, but wouldn't we save a bunch of lives by this? Okay, so behind on these comments. Okay, so many red flags were already identified with previous shooters, and nothing was done. So we also need to. There needs to be comprehensive communication between um, law enforcement agencies to make sure information is being readily shared. And in New York, they have mandatory reporting now with the red flag thing. So there are certain things that law enforcement is required to automatically institute certain procedures when they're dealing with certain individuals. That law was just passed, and I did the video on it Monday. Uh, Kathy Hochul signed that into law. So, like something like that could go nationwide. Buffalo shooter is not from New York. He's not. He's from New York, but not from New York City. He was from where is he from? Peyton. Buffalo shooter. Peyton. He was from Conklin, New York. So he was from upstate New York, but he wasn't from Buffalo. He's definitely not from New York City. Because by the way, if he was from New York City, then there are several zip codes in New York City that have an even higher black concentration than Buffalo. He chose Buffalo because of its high concentration of black people. So it was, I guess, it was one of the closest locations to him that had a high concentration of black people. But yeah, there's even higher concentrations of black people in certain zip codes in New York City. Ending the gun show loophole and universal background checks are basics. I used to work for the census, and checks came back in 2 to 3 weeks. If you were considered red, you were escorted out. Check came back in 2 to 3 weeks. Okay. Gun instance, if you have gun insurance, if you have a car, then you have to have insurance. Why not guns? Those are things I can get behind. So see, there's a lot of gun owners a lot of Second Amendment supporters that don't mind some of these things. So, like, don't we realize that they might have a potential to save some lives? Law enforcement doesn't need AR-15s either. Military doesn't need AR-15s at all. Okay. Okay. Listen, if we can get AR-15s out of the hands of people, I think isn't that a great thing? That's got to be a great thing to just get AR-15s out of the hands. So even if cops don't have them, military don't have them, especially we can be happy that civilians don't have them, and we don't have evil people like Peyton Gendron and this other kid from Uvalde using them indiscriminately against defenseless people shopping at a supermarket and children in an elementary school. Jaden from it. Yeah. Yay. Mental health clearance. You need to be a police. You need one to be a police officer. So, um, mental health is a gray area. A lot of misdiagnosis. I stopped watching David Pakman. So, like, the dude is really. I haven't seen his videos in a very long time. So I actually had to look him up to get some of his perspective, because the dude is really shrewd. And like I said, at some point in the future, I'm gonna have to debate him. And like, okay, I'm getting off topic. I still have to stay in mode. Okay. On the list, I like four, but yeah, I mean, the list has a bunch of interesting things that I think aren't, like, even gun supporters, even Second Amendment supporters can say, hey, that doesn't stop me from having a gun. Psychiatry is horrible. Pakman is a joke and very biased. Besides that, we already have some sort of gun control? If you've been convicted of any kind of felony, you're banned from owning guns. Perfect point. So we already have a bunch of gun control. There are there so federally you can't own a gun if you're convicted of a felony. You also can't own a gun if you've been committed for a mental health offense, for mental if you've been committed for for mental illness. Uh, you also can't own a gun if you're a drug addict. So those are just three things that at a federal level are already banned and people are cool with. There's and even the Supreme Court case, because I actually did see this too, that the Supreme Court ruled in McDonald versus Chicago that private citizens may own weapons, but but their right to own weapons are subject to restrictions on those weapons. So like you said, it's not your right to build and own a nuclear or assault weapon, nor is toting a pistol in your pocket an unfettered natural right. So there's restrictions by law allowed by the Constitution, recognized by the Supreme Court. So it's not a matter of just all or nothing, right? Gun control is just about giving the people less power and the government more. If they cared about human lives, they'd be going after big pharma that's directly responsible for the opioid epidemic. So, for example, welcome to the channel. I hear you, but I don't want to. I think that's a separate issue, and I think that's something we could discuss as well. But I think, like right now, we have to focus on the absolute horrors that are happening to children, to regular people that are just out shopping. So I'm talking to somebody the other day, and they said for the first time, they went to a mall the other day, and for the first time ever, they're actually aware of the possibility that somebody could come into that mall and just start shooting up people. They said something that's never really crossed their mind, especially not in the mall. And now they're in the mall and they're like, wow, what if somebody just starts spraying? Like this is where we're at. It's at a level that we have to stop and do something. Opioids kill way more than guns per year. I mean, but you're saying that since opioids, it's almost as is that's almost as if saying we can't chew bubble gum and walk at the same time. We can start focusing on dealing with the opioid crisis and tackling the gun crisis, which is getting worse because it's definitely getting worse. And we can't ignore it and just pretend like, and then wait until it gets even more worse. Like if we see this happening with frequency, and like if we see 19 babies get slaughtered, they weren't bothering anybody. 10 innocent people going about their business in the supermarket, just shopping, enjoying their days, enjoying their Saturdays, until some maniac, not maniac, some scumbag, some evil piece of garbage decides to murder them. Like, don't we have to do something? Ted Kennedy's car killed more people than my guns. Okay, Rocket Man, Rocky Matrix. But with that list of 10 things, don't you still get to keep your guns? Don't you still get to keep your guns? And perhaps we get to keep the guns out of the hands of somebody who's a very dangerous individual and who means to do people harm. If civilians are restricted from carrying firearms, then restrict law enforcement and military from the same thing. What aboutism? It is a separate issue that's more deadly than guns. Loudmouth flavors. That's what happens when you allow Bolsheviks to run rampant in our society. I disagree that gun violence is getting worse. I believe that people's powers to defend themselves are being infringed. So welcome to your channel, Loudmouth Flavors. Don't you think that there's something we can do to make people safer? To stop, like, do you think there's something we can do to stop some of these mass shootings before they happen? Because waiting till after somebody, some scumbag, some evil, wicked piece of garbage runs into a daycare center and just slaughters a bunch of babies, and then saying, "Oh, like at that point, like what? Why didn't we act prior to do something to stop that person from being able to carry out that heinous act?" Because this Uvalde wasn't the first time little kids were killed. We've got Parkland. We've got like just like people have been going after these schools, killing children, and for no other reason than just to cause pain, to end those children's life and to cause pain to the rest of us. Under 10 minutes. Um, did you hear about the black staff members in Washington on Joe Biden's team? They said he acted like it was just a usual day after finding out on Buffalo. That's really regretful. No, you do not get to keep your guns. Illinois, Cali, New York has heavy gun laws, but criminals in these zip codes, Chicago, LA, New York City, still find a way. Okay, so I was talking earlier. Thank you, D. I was talking earlier about how Reuters did a study. Reuters actually reported on a study that was done by Attorney General Eric Schneiderman that um, 46,514 firearms tied to crimes from 2010 to 2015. So 46,000, almost 47,000 firearms that were tied to crimes from 2010 to 2015 came from out of state. Almost that was so that was almost 86% of the handguns recovered by law enforcement came from different states. So the people weren't getting the guns from New York. They were going to states where it's easier to get guns and then bringing them back to New York. Okay, so how can someone get their gun rights back when it comes to mental health? Um, I'm not sure that there is a mechanism at the moment. I concealed. I conceal carry. I feel perfectly safe. A woman in West Virginia stopped a mass shooting by concealed carrying last week. Didn't hear about that, did you? I actually did hear about that. And I'm saying, so, Frank Zappa, did you hear about those 10 things I listed? Those 10 things I listed. The question is, if those 10 things, could they have, like, universal background checks, um, mandatory gun insurance, prohibition on a longer waiting period, licensing, a longer licensing period and procedure, those things would very likely be able to still have this woman have a gun, but it would stop certain other people from being able to have guns. So perhaps a person like the dude from Uvalde, stopping him from getting a gun because he was under 18. Sorry, he was under 25, and had he tried to go through a licensing thing, like it would have been clear he wouldn't have passed the mental health evaluation. So had we had those things into place, we could have stopped somebody like him from getting a gun, and then somebody like this woman still has her gun and still gets to stop whoever that. And yeah, I saw. I'm trying to think about. I can't remember exactly where that guy himself got his gun, but I did see that story. No, I don't think there's something we can do to stop the mass shootings before they happen, because the police and the government aren't going to do it. So the people are going to have to defend themselves. But isn't there a way to stop the bad guys from getting guns, especially in certain cases? Like, can't we make sure that there's some really egregious cases of some really bad people that shouldn't have had guns, and if we can stop them from having guns, haven't we done something good? That's why it's insane we haven't put security into schools. It's like two extremes talking. No guns versus all the guns. There needs to be a middle ground to work with. Definitely. Ever hear about a shooting inside a courthouse? Yes. Um, I have seen shootings inside a courthouse. Not a lot, but courthouses are heavily protected. But there was the guy that actually brought the gun. Like he waged war in the courthouse, but he was ultimately taken down. Um, Thank you for the super chat, N1C. Um, Definitely, thank you really appreciate it. I'd like to see more training, but make training more accessible. Otherwise, it's limited to people with the money and time to do it. Nearly every gun control is based on one of those constraints. So more training, definitely, because like that would go in line with the licensing. Um, Otherwise, it's limited to people with the money and time to do it. Nearly every gun control is based on one of those constraints. Um, right. So now, in other words, if we're making if the training is a requirement, lower the barrier so that poverty doesn't stop people from being able to get the training. We're under 4 minutes, people. We're under 4 minutes. And thank you again for the super chat, N1C. Um, I heard the FBI had been investigating Peyton on Reddit, making threats to mass shoot at school. Why didn't they pick up Peyton under the Patriot Act? So, with the red flag law, which is now passed in New York City, what that would have done is that would have actually, like, he would have been prohibited from being able to own a gun, and it would have been automatic renewal. Like, he would have had to prove that he was eligible to get a gun after that entire process was started. Um, Talking to people who may need help is a true proactive move, but it will work. Talking to people, listen, definitely intervention, and like intervention on a level of reaching out to people who are going through things is definitely something that I think needs to be done. Loudmouth Flavors LMF. The only thing we can do is arm ourselves. I cannot divine who will do it next. The solution should be to keep the commandments of God. We have divested wholeheartedly from Him. Look what's happened. So, do you feel that, like, because that's almost like saying, it seems like you're saying, then we just don't need laws, because there's no way to determine who's gonna be a bad guy. So we just get rid of all laws, and then let's just see what happens. And practically all of those 2 minute warning, and practically all of those guns from out of state were stolen, which is a crime. But the fact that they existed to be stolen is the problem. So the fact that, like, that they somebody had them, in the house, somebody breaks into their house, steal their guns. If we have less guns available for people to steal, then we can have less guns on the street. Adding more laws makes law-abiding citizens criminals. Who determines what mental health, though? Slippery slope. Well, I mean, you have mental health professionals that can make these determinations. I mean, they make plenty of determinations. Now, if this country didn't operate in a racialized social hierarchy caste system, maybe I'd feel comfortable giving up my gun rights. But the question is, do you need to give up your gun rights if we have that list of things? So if we have a specific list of, under a minute, if we have a specific list of things that we are going to do, it doesn't mean that everybody has to give up their guns. It just means that, like, the laws are more stringent, the screening process is stricter, and guns can be kept out of the hands of some really deranged, some really bad guys. Ideally, there are already copious amounts of laws concerning gun ownership. We do not need new or wider reaching legislation. We need to embrace defending ourselves. There is no catch-all, I'm sorry to say. There is already a middle ground. It's called the Second Amendment. I feel like some of the comments don't understand this is not escaping stance, but it's only giving. Many mental health professionals just jump into conclusions by labeling people without looking into the patient's background. So I'm going to keep reading the statements, keep reading the comments, because the time has expired now. And that was tough, but I want to go over something before I'm not going to just go automatically back to my stance. I think we miss the opportunity if we do that. So many mental health professionals just jump into conclusions by labeling people without looking into. And from my own personal experience, I know that's true. But a lot of people don't have my experience. In fact, vast majority of people don't have my experience and won't understand this. So the vast majority of people will trust mental health professionals. If mental health professionals say, "Oh, this person's dangerous," to go, "Okay, well, this person is a psychologist, a psychiatrist. They can be trusted." And to be fair, I've dealt with mental health professionals that were above board, did right by me, and continue to do right by me. But there are some who have agendas and will do things otherwise. Annual safety classes and training. And so, like, I'm seeing a lot of gun owners that seem to be in support of something like that. Training is accessible. Join the military is free. Guns aren't bad things. Criminals are going to criminal. Delete your Facebook and Instagram. Okay. Without the middle ground, then that's lift the ban on felonies disqualifying gun ownership. Mental health professionals are overwhelmingly on the left and would be biased towards gun ownership. I got to figure out where you got those statistics. I really got to figure out where you got those statistics. I like the TLD's point. Adding more laws do nothing but make law-abiding citizens criminals. I don't. Thank you. I don't trust many mental health professionals. There are many frauds in the field. Okay, so now let me get to me. This was very hard for me to do, to argue from a position, but I wasn't David Pakman on the issue. I'm not going to pretend that I gave the strongest arguments. I think I did decent. But I think it's something we need to be able to do, to understand where other people are coming from, because, like, too often we're not even trying to understand where they're coming from, and we're not even trying to listen to what they're saying. And that's part of the problem. That's part of the problem in this American society, period. So you've got various sides of various issues, and everybody is absolutely 1,000% convinced of their own righteousness, and they're convinced of the bad intentions of the other side. Absolutely convinced that they're righteous and the other side has bad and evil intent. That's not good for any of us. Yes, it's hard, but thank you, Rocket Man. But the thing I really want to do is understand, and like this morning, I was putting myself in the mindset of why. That was the hardest part. And I realized why it's so hard for me to put myself, and why it's so hard for me to see things from the perspective of those that are arguing for gun control. Because my first question to everybody in this chat that is against gun control: do you have anybody that you love, any friends, any family, any significant others that support gun control? And then if you do, just think, is that person evil? Or does that person just see the world differently? Does that person have a different approach to life? Because the way I see it, the reason why I am in so opposed to gun control is because I don't. Okay, so when I put myself, I don't even talk about me. When I put myself into the mindset of people that are in support of gun control, these are people that don't are willing to trust others to protect them. And so they believe that the government is there to protect us. And um, I think the vast majority of people in this country believe that the government is there to protect us. So if we believe that the government is there to protect us, then I realize why these people believe that, okay, well, why do I need a gun? If the government is here to protect me, if the police are there, if I have an issue, if somebody's threatening me, if I'm a potential victim of a crime, I can call the police. If I'm in imminent danger, I can call the police, 911. They'll come, lights flashing, cars, guns blazing. They're ready to protect me. These individuals believe that that's the way the system should work. They believe that's the way the system does work. And so and in many cases, they may have seen the system actually work in that way. So they're not just making these thoughts necessarily out of thin air. Their experience has taught them that that they can trust others with their safety. So they may have, and even if it's not the government that's trusted them, like let's say you're dealing with individuals that grew up in a home where they had parents and the parents protected them. Like this is the mindset of a person that thinks, okay, yeah, I don't need guns. Why do I need guns? The cops have guns, militaries have guns, and regular people shouldn't have guns. So I'm trying to better understand where they're coming from. I'm not saying their arguments, I'm not saying that where they're coming from is perfect, but I can't even have a conversation with the person like this if I'm not making any attempts to understand why they believe what they believe. I've got to at least try. That's the name of the channel is Escaping the Echo Chamber. That's what we have to do. We have to get outside of our echo chamber and understand where other people are coming from. Um, Nothing good has ever come from people in power disarming the common people. I am talking based on my experience. Right. So listen, based on my experience, there's a reason why I don't trust other people with my safety. And I was thinking about it today, that ever since an incident that happened when I was like 6, 7 years old, I have been very aware that it's up to me to protect me. Um, do I know how to operate a firearm? Yes or no? Do me? Yes, I do. I will say, if TLD, you may not know, I am no longer legally allowed to operate a firearm at the current point, because, like, when we talk about good guys with a gun, I've been the bad guy with the gun, unfortunately, and And I don't. So fortunately, nobody was hurt in that situation. Unfortunately, people were scared. People were reasonably in fear of their safety. Um, and so those people, I had a negative impact on those people, and I hate being part of the reason why now people might say, "Oh, well, guns shouldn't be in the hands of civilians." You know what I'm saying? Um, so yes, I do. And okay, so people that are. So now you say they're morons. Are these loved ones, or are these just acquaintances? Because I think we're too quick to dismiss people that disagree with us instead of trying to understand them. Um, I'm not willing to trust other people to protect me. I don't trust government at all. How could anyone after the past 2 years? But you see, this is what I'm saying. If this is what we have to realize. We're dealing with a completely different core set of reasoning, a core set of principles. So um, I'm trying to think of an analogy, and nothing's coming. Like I'm thinking almost like a computer. Like if you've got two computer programs, and one processes information completely different than another. Like that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with two separate computer programs, two separate core sets of principles that people are processing information through. I'm processing as a person that, like, it's up to me to protect me. I've been through stuff in my life. I've seen stuff in my life, and I've been in situations where, okay, I'm all I got. I got to do it. But there are so many people that don't have my experience, and so many people that, like, my experiences aren't common, and aren't actually, like, they're not great experiences. Like, I people don't want to have these experiences, and I get it. Like, you don't. Um, these are situations that are unpleasant situations that have led me to look at the world in a completely different way than many people look at the world. Many people look at the world, they believe in the system, they trust in the system to a degree. Even the people that know there's so much corruption in the system, they still believe in the system because they fear an existence without the system. But that's based, their experience and their mindset is based on their experiences. The Uvalde police or government, they fail to protect anyone. The solution is not to disarm me. Listen, the hour is over. I get it. I'm trying to get the other side. I'm trying to get other. I'm not going to say the other side because I think there's other perspectives. There's various other perspectives, and I think that right now we're seeing a perspective branch off of, because remember, those of us that are hardcore don't trust government. And so Amazing Lucas, he's actually been calling for some kind of changes, some kind of restrictions, some kind of regulation, even in terms of training. And he says the argument, if you're saying the argument is that, okay, well, criminals don't obey the law anyway. He says, well, you're an anarchist. And the interesting thing is, I actually am an anarchist. And so I'm like, fair point. I am an anarchist. And that's why I'm like, yeah, like I can see a world, I can envision and be comfortable in a world without government. Most people can't. Most people in the United States, most people on this planet, but let's focus on America. Most people in America cannot be comfortable, cannot envision a world without government. And if I try to sell people on a vision right now, like if I just tried just from now, try to sell people on a vision of a world without government, they can't even hear me. They can't even begin to hear me. I'm talking past them. I'm speaking in a foreign language. I'm speaking I'm not just using slang. I'm speaking in a completely different, not even, I'm not even speaking a human language. I'm making sounds that they can't even interpret as a language. We're so far apart in our core principles that if I want to actually have a conversation, if those of us that think that there shouldn't be any further gun laws, if we want to have conversations with people that think that guns should be banned, then we've got to make some shifts in our perspective to be able to communicate with them. And we've got to understand where they're coming from. We've got to understand their pain because they're in pain. They're in fear. They're in pain. They're in shock. And it's real. It's legitimate. Like, this isn't just a fantasy. And so it's easy to say, oh, they're enemy, they're morons. It's easy to say that. That accomplishes nothing, but it's easy to say. And it's I don't even think it's a fair thing to say. Because if we're looking at their core principles, if we're looking at their core beliefs, and then we insert the information that they're inserting into that program, we'll see, okay, I see where they're coming from. I see how they get from this point to this point in believing that. But we have to understand that they're coming from a completely different core set of principles. The Supreme Court ruled that police have no obligation to help people. And so many people don't know that. It's easy for a tyrannical government to overpower a disarmed population. There are so many examples of that throughout history. Now tell me this. What is realer in the mind of let's say we go into a room right now, Frank Zappa, let's say we go into a room right now full of people who are supporting, and not just supporting, who are calling for the government to implement more gun control. If we go into that room full of those people and you tell them about a tyrannical government, what is realer to them? So we go up to them and we say, listen, if we pass these gun laws, we won't be safe from a tyrannical government. We will not be safe. We'll be at risk. That's what we say, right? Then Matthew McConaughey comes in and tells that same audience, if they don't pass gun laws, they won't be safe. Their children will not be safe from the next. What was this? I don't even remember this guy's name. Ramos, Uvalde shooter. Whatever, yeah, the Uvalde shooter. They won't be safe from Salvador Ramos, the next Salvador Ramos. Who will they listen to? Like, we're telling them that they're at threat. If they pass these laws, they're at threat from a tyrannical government. Matthew McConaughey comes in, and let's say it's not Matthew McConaughey. Let's say some regular person comes in and tells them they won't be safe. Their children will not be safe from the next Salvador Ramos. Which threat is more real to them? Which threat do they consider an actual option? Which threat do they consider something that can legitimately happen, not just within their lifetime, within the next 5 years, within the next year, within the next couple of weeks? Which do they see as a threat that can actually happen in their lives? You think they see a tyrannical government as a legitimate threat to their lives? Or do you think they see another Salvador Ramos, another hateful scumbag that decides to murder children? Which one do you think they consider a legitimate threat? We go in there talking about tyrannical government, we lose 100 times out of 100 every single time. There's no way we take this argument about a tyrannical government to people who just watched the last 30 days in the United States and convince them that like the only people we get with that argument are people that already believe it. That's it. There's no way we convince the vast majority of Americans, regular Americans that are actually calling for gun control with that argument. So yes, Kenny, and that's a fact about the Supreme Court not ruling that police don't have to help people. I absolutely know it's a fact. In a lot of cases, the 911 operator would try to get you to make a statement against yourself and try to frame you for defending yourself. Look at the baby when dealing with an intruder he shot. Okay. Jessica Gonzalez versus the town of Castle Rock. SCOTUS ruling where law enforcement is not constitutionally obligated to serve and protect citizens. I hear you. And so guess what? I think that is a better argument than the tyrannical government. A negligent government. You see what I'm saying? Because, so Frank Zappa, I hear you. When you talk about tyrannical government, that is very real to me. Like, that is so real to me, but it's because of what I've experienced. Most people have not experienced what I've experienced. Most people have not dealt with the government as I've dealt with the government. Most people have not had the experiences with government that I've had with government. So most people will not be able to understand my perspective and why I view government as such a threat. But if we take a look at what they're talking about now with the government not protecting its citizens, as opposed to the government being an active threat against its citizens, that is a much better argument. Here's why it's a much better argument. Because Uvalde, right now in Uvalde, we watched the police, 19 police officers, stand outside the door of this school, of this classroom, while babies were being murdered. So if we're going to be talking, right now, if we're talking to individuals that are advocating for gun control, tyrannical government cannot be an option. That cannot be part of the conversation. Because as far as they're concerned, that's fantasy. As far as they're concerned, that's paranoia. As far as they're concerned, that's what we say that they see us as the crackpots they need to be worried about having guns. That's what they see. If we talk about how government failed to protect people, because we just saw it. We saw it in Uvalde. We saw it in Parkland. And by the way, that school resource officer should be going on trial soon. These are the things we need to be talking about. So we need to be talking about how there's a school security officer that let that dude walk inside the school, knowing this dude was dangerous, before he started killing people. And then the other guy that hung outside and just hid while kids were getting slaughtered inside the school. These are things that could be real to people. So talking about government failing to protect people is something that we can talk to people about, something that we can start to help them understand our perspective. It's a beginning to help them understand our perspective, to start to see, okay, wait a minute. Maybe there's a better solution. Yep. Reason for the Second Amendment is to stop a tyrannical government. Same thing I gotta say. Whether or not that's the purpose, how many American citizens actually view a tyrannical government as a legitimate threat? Bruh. These are loved ones. Tackle. I propose a welfare program that helps low-income families afford a firearm for every household member. Well, see, if you're gonna have extra, see, so one of the things is I looked at that list of things that Dave Packman had, and especially like the mandatory insurance one is one that struck me that would hurt poor people disproportionately. That's definitely a problem. And so, if we're going to have that discussion about that particular potential policy, that's something we need to address. Um, Disney did with Reedy Creek. I'm not sure what you mean by that. Let me just Reedy Creek. Let me look that up. Reedy Creek. Progressive created. Gurgen, Indiana is a libertarian city in India. India or Indiana? Gurgen, India. Let me look that up. Gurgen. But see, so the thing is, the way I'm looking at this is we're not going to like we just, if we just keep sticking to our own perspective, our own talking points, we're just going to keep talking past each other. If we make no attempt to understand where other people are coming from, what other people are feeling, like, and that's an important thing. What other people are feeling, because that's what I really had to get into. And once I get into that, like if I understand that the people that are many of the people that are calling for gun control right now are scared, are horrified, are worried, are sickened, and are in pain. They're watching innocent people get slaughtered. They're watching innocent people get slaughtered. And if I come to them talking about a tyrannical government, not only do I sound out of touch, I sound like I don't give a damn. But I do. I do give a damn. Um, I do care about people being able to protect themselves. I do care about people living. I do care about people not being murdered, not being slaughtered. I definitely care about it. I care about it. And I think there's a lot of gun owners that can offer perspective because, in fact, I don't have the play on me, but I've got to find it. So I'll actually tell the story in a future video. But I actually wrote a play dealing with these issues of people from different perspectives, because there are people that are in support of gun control because they've seen terrible things happen with guns. They've seen, whether they've seen it on TV, whether they've seen these instances of children being slaughtered, whether they've had personal experiences with a child, a family member, a sibling, a spouse dying because of gun violence or being harmed because of gun violence or just a gun. Like, they will have a very personal motivation for wanting guns out of the picture. But there's a flip side. You see, because there's a lot of people that are here today. There are a lot of people that are breathing today. There are a lot of people that are safe today because they had a gun. There are a lot of people whose families are alive today because they had guns. There are a lot of people who protected themselves, protected their wives, their husbands, their children, their brothers, their sisters, their mothers, their fathers with a gun. There are people that manage to fight off home invaders, fend off, scare off home invaders because they had that badass looking AR 15. They had a gun that made the intruders look at and say, whoa, whoa, I'm gone. Some cases they had to use these guns. But there are people that whose lives were saved by guns. If you're going to have that conversation about gun control, gun violence, let people know if you're one of those individuals who's were able to protect yourself with the gun. Let people know. Like we can have very impactful and personal discussions with one another if we're willing to actually talk to each other rather than just at each other. If we're willing to say, okay, I can see where, in your perspective and through the things that you've been through, why you've come to this conclusion. Let me explain to you why I've come to this conclusion. Let me explain to you certain things in my life that have happened that lead me to believe I don't want to be any place without my gun. I don't want to be stuck in my house without having a gun in each room, you know, where I know somebody comes in, boom. I don't have to get to the basement to get a gun. They're downstairs. I'm on the second floor. I've got a gun in my bedroom. Boom. I can protect myself. I can protect my family. They will be more scared and more horrified when the Bolsheviks take control. It is sad, really. We are watching our country go the way of Russia. Growing up in LA with all the gun laws, I still had an arms dealer on my block. Despite the laws, I was literally steps away from getting my hands on almost anything. And yeah, many of us in the city, especially, like we know who the gun dudes are, the gun people are, and if you need something, you know where to go get it. But there's a lot of people who who don't. There's a lot of people who don't live these who aren't familiar with that lifestyle, so it's an alien world to them. So you see the world differently than they do, and this is the whole point of this. Um, that I really wanted to get to, of understanding, getting outside ourselves, understanding what is important to others, and thinking about, okay, from their perspective, I can see how they got to how they reached certain conclusions. But if you're not willing to address them based on their concerns, then you'll never reach them. If I'm not willing to talk to them based on what they're concerned about, what they fear, what they've seen, what they have experienced, then the only person that's going to reach them is the people that are arguing that, okay, yeah, we need to ban everything. Then I'm like, oh wow, how they support it? Oh, they're stupid. No, I was stupid because I didn't make a genuine attempt to understand where they were coming from. I didn't reach out to them. I didn't listen. But if I listen and I realize, okay, these people are scared. These people are afraid. Okay, why are they afraid? What makes them afraid and what makes them feel safer? So having a government that is competent, doing its job and protecting them makes them feel safer. But if I can let them know, hey, if we look at Uvalde, we look at Parkland, We see examples of when the government didn't live up to its promise. How do we protect ourselves, our families, and our little ones from that? Not a tyrannical government, a negligent government, a government that is not either staffed by cowards or just incompetence. Even when I was sent out of my neighborhood to a rich white school, you'd still be surprised with some of those. Oh, absolutely. Not surprised. Oh, absolutely. Um. So yeah, that was a. It was a. I want to do more of that. I want to do more of getting outside my head, getting outside of my arguments, and actually really trying to immerse myself in the perspectives of others. I think it's hugely beneficial. I think it will, and I think it's something we need to be doing just as a society. As a like, there's too much, foolishness in this country right now of just everybody picking teams and everybody talking past each other. Nobody willing to stop and think, why does this person believe this? Huh? Wow. This person, this person is opposed to guns because their 5-year old found a gun, shot himself to death. That's why they hate guns. Think about it. That happens to somebody. I get it. I get why they hate guns. So I want to thank everybody for for hanging out with me during the stream, for for helping me get through this, because like I said, it wasn't easy arguing from a different perspective. Uh, Definitely want to thank N1C for the super chat. Really appreciate it. Uh, and want to thank everyone who came on the stream, watched the stream, commented on the stream. And like I said, I'm gonna do this again. And I hope you all will continue, like, push back, like help me, like, if you disagree with the position I'm taking, um yeah, give me an ability to try to better understand where these people are coming from, where other perspectives are coming from. So thanks everyone for checking out the stream. Be Kenny, be well, definitely be well, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your afternoon, evening.